Imagine this: California. On a quiet, windswept evening in May of 1944, inside a modest beach house overlooking the Pacific, two men stand frozen in a moment that feels like the end of a lifetime. One breath, one silence, one sentence that shatters 12 years. So, that's it? 12 years? And you're walking away? No camera was rolling, no script was written, but this was the moment Cary Grant's world collapsed. The day Randolph Scott, his closest companion, his secret, his anchor, walked out of their shared home in Malibu and into a respectable marriage the world approved of, but Cary never recovered from. That day, Cary Grant didn't just lose someone he loved. He lost the only place he could be Archibald Leach, the man behind the mask. Not Cary Grant, the flawless Hollywood gentleman. This wasn't the betrayal fans imagined. This was the betrayal Hollywood hid. And to understand why Cary Grant truly hated him more deeply than anyone else, to understand why that moment scarred him for the rest of his life, we have to go back to 1932, back to when two unknown young actors met in a crowded Hollywood party and quietly began a relationship that would define them and ultimately destroy them. This is the story Cary Grant never told publicly, the story he took to his grave in 1986. The story revealed only decades later through private therapy letters his widow tried to destroy. The real story of Cary Grant and Randolph Scott, the perfect bachelors and Hollywood's most carefully hidden love. 1932. Hollywood in the Great Depression, glittering on the surface, desperate beneath it. Studios were tightening budgets, young actors were scrambling for survival, and fame was nothing more than a cruel lottery. Amid that chaos stood two men who had no idea their lives were about to collide. Archibald Leach, not yet Cary Grant, not yet the icon, not yet the effortless gentleman the world would worship. Just a working-class kid from Bristol, England, a former acrobat who slept in cheap boarding rooms and carried more insecurities than belongings. He had just entered Hollywood with a Paramount contract, clutching onto dreams that felt too big for him. Randolph Scott, not yet the tall, all-American cowboy star he would become. A handsome Virginia-born actor from a wealthy family, educated, charming, and quietly ambitious. He had the clean-cut look Hollywood loved, but not yet the fame. They met at one of those glossy Hollywood parties where young actors hovered near the walls and studio executives prowled like lions. The kind of party filled with forced laughter, artificial compliments, and the unmistakable scent of desperation masked by cologne and champagne. Neither Archie nor Randy fit in. Both were uncomfortable. Both were pretending. Both were exhausted from acting long before they ever stepped in front of a camera. They found each other in a corner, two strangers escaping the crowd. They talked about the industry, about how fake everything felt, about the loneliness behind Hollywood glamour. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic. It was simply two lost young men recognizing something familiar in each other. Weeks later, they were inseparable. Months later, they moved in together. Just two bachelors. Hollywood said, two men sharing rent during the Depression. Perfectly normal. Their home, Bachelor Hall, was a beach house in Malibu. Modest, sunlit, quiet. A refuge from the brutal, performative grind of the studios. And photographs from those years became famous. Cary Grant and Randolph Scott cooking together, lounging by the pool, wearing matching robes, laughing with a comfort that looked intimate even through black and white film. Hollywood magazines celebrated them. Hollywood's most eligible bachelors. The perfect roommates. No one questioned it. Or if they did, they never said it out loud. 1932 was a different world, and two handsome men sharing a house was amusing, not scandalous. But the truth behind those photos was deeper. This wasn't friendship. This wasn't convenience. This was the beginning of a relationship, one that would last 12 years, one that looked, felt, and existed like a marriage, one that the world was never allowed to acknowledge. In his private letters written decades later, Cary Grant described those early years simply. 1932 to 1936 were the happiest years of my life. I wasn't Cary Grant yet. I was still Archie. And Randy wasn't a star. He was just Randy. We could be ourselves behind those doors. No performance, no fear, just us. They weren't hiding exactly. They were simply being themselves in plain sight. But they were careful. Always careful. No labels, no public affection, no admissions. Just two men building a life the world refused to recognize. But Hollywood changes people. Success changes people. Fame transforms and destroys, often in the same breath. By 1936, Archibald Leach was disappearing, and Cary Grant, the legend, was being born. And with that transformation came pressures, expectations, rumors, and a new kind of fear. The first person to truly see through the performance, the man who recognized Archie beneath Cary and used that vulnerability for artistic control, was none other than Alfred Hitchcock. As Cary Grant's star rose through the late 1930s and into the 1940s, something shifted. Archibald Leach, the insecure boy from Bristol, was being buried beneath the polished, elegant, impossibly charming persona of Cary Grant. And behind that persona lived fear. Fear of discovery, fear of exposure, fear that the life he had built with Randolph Scott could collapse at any moment. Then came the one man in Hollywood who saw through everything, Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense, the director who knew how to peel people open like an onion, layer by layer, until the truth underneath was exposed. Hitchcock directed Grant in 4 iconic films: Suspicion, Notorious, To Catch a Thief, and North by Northwest. Each one showcased the smoothest, most breathtaking version of Cary Grant the world had ever seen. But Hitchcock wasn't mesmerized by the performance. He wasn't fooled by the elegance, the charm, the effortless sophistication. He saw something else. He saw Archie, the frightened working-class boy playing dress-up as Hollywood's perfect man. And Hitchcock used that knowledge like a scalpel. One of the clearest examples came during the filming of North by Northwest in 1959, during the legendary crop duster sequence. Grant was forced to run in an open field as a real plane swooped terrifyingly close overhead. The danger wasn't an illusion. The fear on his face wasn't acting. Between takes, Cary approached Hitchcock, breathless. "Alfred, this is too close. This is genuinely dangerous. I'm actually afraid." Hitchcock's response was chilling. A cold smile, that unmistakable Hitchcock grin. "Good. I want you afraid. I want Archibald Leach's fear on Cary Grant's face." Those words haunted Grant for years because Hitchcock understood what even Cary's wives never fully grasped, that Cary Grant wasn't a real man. He was a character, a performance, a mask, and Hitchcock wanted the man behind that mask. In Grant's private therapy letters, he wrote, "Hitchcock terrified me, not because he was cruel, but because he saw through everything. He directed Archie pretending to be Cary, and he made sure I knew he knew." After North by Northwest, Cary never worked with Hitchcock again. He couldn't. Being around Hitchcock meant confronting the truth that Cary Grant, Hollywood's most elegant leading man, was nothing more than the most exhausting role Archie had ever played. But Hitchcock, for all his cold manipulation, wasn't the person Cary Grant hated most. No, Hitchcock only exploited the performance. The next person lived through it, suffered inside it, and became a casualty of the life Cary Grant was desperately trying to hide. Her name was Barbara Hutton, the heiress, the socialite, and the woman Cary married while still living with Randolph Scott, 1942. Cary Grant stood at the peak of Hollywood royalty, handsome, adored, wealthy, and impossibly polished. And yet, behind the curtains of his Malibu home, he was still living with Randolph Scott, still returning each night to the only place he truly felt like himself. But Hollywood had rules. Rules about image, rules about respectability, rules about the kinds of questions journalists and the studio bosses were beginning to whisper. A 38-year-old bachelor was acceptable for a while, but not forever. Not if he wanted his career untouchable, not if he wanted the rumors to die. And so in 1942, Cary Grant made a decision that would scar him and another innocent life forever. He married Barbara Hutton, the Woolworth heiress, one of the richest, most fragile young women in America. The press mocked them instantly. Cash and Cary, they sneered. They painted him as a gold digger, a man marrying her fortune instead of her heart. But that wasn't true. He didn't need her money anymore. His films were massive successes. He was already a millionaire many times over. He married her because Hollywood demanded it. Because being Cary Grant meant protecting the illusion, no matter the cost. Because studios wanted stability, not scandal. And because Randolph Scott was still living with him, and that was becoming harder to explain. The marriage lasted 3 painful years, 1942 to 1945, and every one of them was a quiet tragedy. Barbara Hutton wasn't naive. She wasn't blind. She knew something was wrong. She knew her husband returned spiritually, emotionally, privately, not to her, but to the man waiting in the beach house. She sensed the truth, even without knowing the full reality, that she was playing a role in a performance she had never agreed to. That Cary Grant, the husband, was different from Cary Grant, the actor, and even more different from the elusive, wounded Archie lurking beneath it all. Cary wrote in his private letters, "Barbara deserved better, better than the performance I gave her, better than divided loyalties, better than sharing a husband with a life he would not give up." The nights were hardest, Barbara crying softly, pills and alcohol numbing the ache. Cary lying beside her, feeling like an imposter in his own life. Two strangers in the same bed, one broken by loneliness, the other broken by the weight of his own deception. When they divorced in 1945, Barbara treated him with remarkable grace. She told the press it was mutual. She insisted they would remain friends. She protected him more than he ever protected her. And the very day the divorce papers were finalized, Cary returned to the beach house in Malibu, returned to Randy, returned to the only version of himself that felt real. But something had changed. Hollywood wasn't the same in 1945. The world was different, harsher, more watchful. The war had reshaped ideas about masculinity, privacy, and morality. People asked questions more bluntly, reporters dug more aggressively, and someone powerful, someone dangerous, someone who collected secrets like trophies, was watching Cary and Randolph very closely. a man whose influence stretched far beyond studios, a man whose power could ruin anyone with a single whisper. Howard Hughes? By 1945, Cary Grant had lived two parallel lives for more than a decade. One life was public, the elegant star, the perfect gentleman, the icon of charm and sophistication. The other was hidden, late nights at the Malibu beach house, shared meals, shared routines, and a shared life with Randolph Scott that looked more like a quiet marriage than anything Hollywood would ever accept. But secrets in Hollywood never stay safe, not when powerful men begin to take notice. And no man in Hollywood was more powerful, more unpredictable, or more dangerously intrusive than Howard Hughes. Hughes was a titan, a billionaire aviator, producer, and obsessive collector of influence. His empire wasn't just built on money, but on something far more potent, leverage. He gathered secrets the way other men collected art. He paid investigators, he bribed police, he kept meticulous files on every star who mattered. And he had a file on Cary Grant, a thick one, filled with photographs of the beach house, snapshots of Cary and Randolph in unguarded domestic moments. Nothing explicit, but suggestive enough to destroy careers in an era where the truth was unthinkable. In 1945, Hughes produced a film and wanted Cary Grant for the lead. Grant declined respectfully. Wrong script, wrong role. No interest? Hughes didn't accept rejection. A week later, Cary received a call from Hughes's lawyer. Urgent meeting. No explanation. In that dim office, the lawyer slid a file across the table. Inside were the photographs, frozen moments of the life Cary had guarded for 12 years. Moments the public would never understand. Moments the newspapers would use to tear him apart. Moments that could ruin both him and Randolph instantly. And then came the warning. Mr. Hughes hopes you will reconsider the role. If not, these photographs may find their way to certain columnists. Cary Grant understood immediately. This wasn't negotiation, it was blackmail, polished, professional, devastating. He took the role. He hated every second of filming, but he did it because there was no alternative. Because protecting Randolph and protecting himself required silence and submission. In his private letters, Cary wrote, "Howard Hughes owns people. That's his talent, his obsession. He collects their secrets and makes them dance. He owned me for one film, just one, but it was enough to teach me what fear truly is." Randolph wanted to fight. He wanted to sue, expose Hughes, stand up publicly. But Cary said no, because fighting meant admitting meant a scandal. Scandal meant the end, so he obeyed. Howard Hughes moved on, but the damage remained. Cary learned the most painful lesson of his life. You cannot have secrets and power at the same time. Eventually, someone stronger will use one to take the other. And suddenly, the life he shared with Randolph Scott, the home that had once been their sanctuary, became a liability, a weakness, a weapon that could be used against them. But even Hughes, the richest, most brilliant, most manipulative man in Hollywood, wasn't the person Cary Grant hated most. Hughes weaponized the performance. The next person destroyed the illusion entirely. She was young, brilliant, emotional, and utterly unwilling to play along with the facade. She refused to protect the image. She refused to pretend. She told the truth. Her name was Diane Cannon. By the mid-1960s, Cary Grant had perfected the role of Cary Grant. He had worn the mask for so long that the line between the man and the character had almost completely vanished. He was elegant, he was charming, he was polished beyond belief. But beneath that immaculate surface lived a man fractured by decades of secrecy, control, shame, and the unresolved grief of losing Randolph Scott. And then, in 1965, Cary Grant married someone who refused to worship the performance, Diane Cannon. She was 28. He was 61. Her first marriage, his fourth. She entered the marriage believing she was marrying a legend, Hollywood's ultimate gentleman, a dream, a myth made flesh. Instead, she found Archibald Leach, the anxious, wounded, deeply insecure core that Cary Grant hid from the world. Grant had begun experimenting with LSD therapy under the guidance of Dr. Mortimer Hartman, a desperate attempt to untangle decades of buried emotional pain. The therapy cracked him open, revealing past traumas he had spent a lifetime avoiding, his childhood abandonment, his fabricated persona, and the love he lost in 1944. Diane didn't understand the storms brewing inside him. She only saw the symptoms, the jealousy, the control, the paranoia, the emotional volatility. She asked questions. She pushed for honesty. She wanted truth, real truth. Not image, not performance, but Cary Grant couldn't give her that. The persona was glued to his skin. The mask had fused with the man. Their marriage collapsed in 3 turbulent years, marked by one bright moment, the birth of their daughter Jennifer and 1,000 darker ones. When Diane Cannon filed for divorce, she refused to play Hollywood's game. She refused to protect his image. She refused to lie. She told the court what she had lived: the control, the LSD therapy, the emotional chaos, the impossible contradiction between Cary Grant, the icon, and Archie Leach, the man. And suddenly, the world glimpsed what Cary had spent 40 years hiding: that behind the perfect leading man was a human being far more fragile than anyone imagined. Cary Grant never forgave her. In his private letters, he wrote, "Diane betrayed me. Not like Randy. Randy left quietly. Diane exposed me. She told the world truths that were mine alone to hide. She was right, and that made me hate her more, because if Diane could see through the mask, and if she could reveal the truth publicly, then what was the point of a lifetime of pretending? Why suffer behind a performance if the world would eventually see the cracks anyway?" Yet even Diane Cannon, who revealed his therapy, his insecurities, his struggles, did not expose the deepest truth of all. She never spoke of Randolph Scott. She never knew that secret. By the time their marriage collapsed in 1968, Randolph had been gone for 24 years. Married, distant, silent, a ghost hovering over Cary's life, haunting every failed relationship, every lonely night, every therapy session, every marriage that could not survive the shadow of what came before. And so, with Diane gone, with his image wounded, and with his personal life in ruins once again, Cary Grant began writing letters, long, painful confessional letters to his psychiatrist, trying to understand the moment everything truly broke. Those letters bring us back to May of 1944, to the conversation that destroyed him. May of 1944, the Malibu beach house, Bachelor Hall, the home Cary Grant and Randolph Scott had shared for 12 long, intertwined years, years of quiet routines, shared breakfasts, laughter by the pool, matching robes, secret hopes, and a love hidden in plain sight. On that day, the air inside the house felt different, heavy, electric, trembling with something Cary couldn't name but instinctively feared. He stood by the tall living room window, staring at the ocean, its waves folding into each other under the pale California sun. He didn't turn when he heard footsteps behind him. He didn't have to. He knew Randy's walk like he knew his own heartbeat. A silence hung between them, a silence both familiar and foreign. Then Cary finally spoke, his voice low, controlled, already breaking. So, that's it? 12 years? And you're walking away? Randolph Scott exhaled. He wasn't angry, not yet, just tired. Tired in a way that came from years of pretending, years of performing, years of half-truths that suffocated even the deepest love. What choice do I have, Cary? You could choose us, Cary answered, almost whispering. Silence again, but this time it felt final. Randy stepped closer. I'm 36 years old. I can't be a bachelor forever. Hollywood tolerated it a long time, but there's a limit. My agent is asking questions. The studio is asking questions. Columnists are circling. Let them ask. Cary's voice cracked. It's not that simple. It is that simple, Cary snapped back. You're choosing the easy path, the coward's path. Randy flinched. Don't call me a coward. You don't understand what I'm risking. What you're risking? What about what you're throwing away? Randy looked away, jaw tightening. What am I throwing away, Cary? We can't marry, can't be together publicly, can't build a life in the open. What we have? It's everything privately, but publicly it's nothing. And I can't live privately forever. Cary finally turned around. For the first time in the entire conversation, he looked directly at Randy, really looked at him. The man he had loved since 1932. The man who knew Archie, not Cary. The man who held the only version of him that ever felt real. So Patricia Stillman is your escape? Your freedom? His tone was sharp, trembling with hurt. Randy sighed. Patricia is normal? Acceptable, safe. No one will question why I married her. It solves everything. It solves nothing. It solves my life. Cary? He took a long breath. I want children, a family, a life I can actually live, not hide. Cary stepped back as if struck. What about this life? What about what we have? A long, aching pause. It mattered to me, Randy said softly. It mattered more than anything. But I'm tired, Cary. Tired of hiding, tired of performing, tired of living half a life. So you'd rather live a lie everyone accepts? At least it's a lie with a future. Grant's voice turned hollow. This house, this so-called prison you talk about, was our home. It was, Randy replied, but I'm done hiding. He walked toward the door. The sound of the ocean grew louder behind him. If you walk out that door, Cary whispered, we're finished. I'll never forgive you. Randy turned, eyes shining, voice breaking. I know. 12 years, Randy. 12 years of my life, the only years that mattered. And if I stay, we'll both die in this house, Randy said. Two old bachelors whispered about, pitied, trapped in a life we can't name. Is that what you want? I want you to stay. No, Cary, you want me to suffer with you. That's different. Anger and heartbreak clashed in Cary's chest. Then go, he said bitterly. Marry your heiress. Have your normal life, but don't expect my blessing. Don't expect a wedding gift. Don't expect friendship afterward. I don't expect anything, Randy whispered, except that someday you'll understand. I'll never understand. Randy nodded once, then turned. Goodbye, Cary? Goodbye, Randy? The door closed with a soft click, but to Cary it sounded like a coffin shutting. Randolph Scott walked out of Bachelor Hall for the last time, out of 12 shared years, out of their hidden world, out of the only home that had ever felt real. He married Patricia Stillman weeks later. Their marriage would last 43 years until his death in 1987. Cary Grant poured himself a drink, then another, He stood alone in the beach house they once shared, the house where he had been Archie, not Cary, and in that moment he began the longest performance of his life. 42 years of pretending to be a man who didn't exist. When Randolph Scott walked out of Bachelor Hall in 1944, the door didn't just close on a chapter, it slammed shut on the only life Cary Grant ever lived honestly, and the years that followed were nothing short of a slow, elegant unraveling. Randolph married Patricia Stillman in June of 1944, barely a month after leaving the Malibu beach house. It was a practical marriage, a respectable one, a perfect fit for the Hollywood mold. 2 children, a quiet estate, a life that looked exactly the way America expected a leading man's life to look. Their marriage lasted 43 years until Scott's death in 1987. He never spoke publicly about Cary Grant again, not a word beyond the safe, rehearsed line, "We were good friends, we were roommates in the early days." The world kept the photos, the sunlit images of them by the pool, cooking together, lounging in matching robes. But the meaning behind those photos remained buried under decades of silence. Meanwhile, Cary Grant walked a very different path. He married again and again and again. 5 marriages, 5 attempts to create what Randy found, 5 attempts to conform, 5 attempts to replace the irreplaceable. Betsy Drake, Diane Cannon, Barbara Harris. Each marriage began with hope. Each ended with disappointment, because Cary Grant wasn't capable of intimacy anymore, not real intimacy, not the kind that required vulnerability, not the kind that required Archie, the man Randy once loved. He had buried Archie too deep, and the world expected Cary Grant, the mask, the illusion, the gentleman, not the broken soul behind it. In his private therapy letters to Dr. Mortimer Hartman, written during LSD-assisted sessions in the 1960s, Grant finally admitted the truth. "I've been married 5 times, 5 women, 5 failures. People ask why. Why can't Cary Grant stay married? Because Cary Grant doesn't exist. He's a performance I perfected over 40 years. The women didn't marry Archie Leach. They married Cary Grant, the image projected on a movie screen, and when the mask slipped, when insecurity and fear replaced charm and elegance, the illusion collapsed." He wrote, "The women married a dream, then they came home and found me instead. But one confession stood above all the others. One truth," he repeated again and again. "Randy understood me before Cary Grant existed. He loved Archie. No one else ever did." That loss, the loss of the only man who knew the real him, was the wound Cary Grant never healed from. He hated Randolph Scott, not because Randy hurt him maliciously, but because Randy escaped. Randy survived. Randy built a life. While Cary was trapped in the persona he created, a persona he could never remove. 42 years passed from the day Randy left until Cary's death. 42 years of pretending, 42 years of loneliness hidden behind a dazzling smile. 42 years of failing at the one thing he wanted most, to be loved without a mask. Then, on November 29th, 1986, in Davenport, Iowa, Cary Grant collapsed backstage while preparing for a public appearance. A stroke, sudden, final. Hollywood mourned the loss of its greatest leading man, an icon of elegance, sophistication, perfection. The obituaries celebrated him, praised him, canonized him. They wrote about his charm, his films, his magic. But they didn't mention Randolph Scott, not beyond a single benign sentence. They shared a home in the 1930s. 4 months later, on March 2nd, 1987, Randolph Scott died quietly in Beverly Hills. He was 89. His obituary listed his wife Patricia, their children, his film career, and one line, just one, acknowledging that he once shared a home with Cary Grant. 43 years of marriage for Randy. 5 marriages for Cary. None of them lasting the way the world expected. 2 lives, 2 directions, one truth buried beneath both. Bachelor Hall remained the silent witness, the home where Archie Leach, not Cary Grant, truly lived. The truth did not emerge while Cary Grant lived. It didn't surface in interviews, in memoirs, or in the carefully curated version of his life that Hollywood packaged for public consumption. It surfaced decades later, quietly, shockingly, irrevocably, in a box of papers discovered after the death of Dr. Mortimer Hartman, the psychiatrist who guided Cary through intense LSD-assisted therapy in the 1960s. Inside that box were letters, hundreds of them, handwritten, raw, unfiltered, the closest thing to a confession Cary Grant ever left behind. When Hartman's estate released them in 2018, Cary's widow Barbara Harris fought desperately to keep them sealed. She insisted on privacy, dignity, legacy. She argued that the world didn't need to know the darkest corners of Cary's heart. But she lost. In 2024, the letters became public. Not all of them. The most explicit, most revealing passages remained sealed, but enough surfaced to change everything the world thought it knew, enough to recontextualize the famous photos of Bachelor Hall, enough to unravel the myth of Hollywood's perfect bachelors, enough to understand what those 12 years truly meant. In the final letter, dated 1985, 1 year before his death, Cary Grant, 81 years old, frail, exhausted, wrote with a clarity he never allowed himself in life. I am too old for secrets, too old for performances, too old for anything but truth. Then came the words that stripped away 60 years of illusion. Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I wanted to be Cary Grant. I spent my life becoming him, and I succeeded. Too well. He wrote about the construction of the persona, how it grew from Archibald Leach's insecurities, how fame amplified the mask, how performance became survival. Then he wrote the line that historians and fans still struggle to process. Becoming Cary Grant meant killing Archie Leach. The letters revealed a man who knew he had traded authenticity for immortality, chosen applause over intimacy, chosen safety over truth, chosen the mask over his own soul, and at the center of that sacrifice, the heart of the wound, stood Randolph Scott. Cary wrote, Randy loved Archie, not Cary. He loved the person before the performance, before Hollywood rewrote me. He described the way Randy saw him, the unpolished, insecure, real version, and how that kind of love terrified him even as it sustained him. Then came the admission he had hidden for more than 4 decades. Losing Randy destroyed me, not because he left, but because he escaped. He lived, he survived, while I remained trapped in a man who did not exist. And finally, the most devastating confession of all, I did not hate Randy, I hated myself for choosing the performance over the person, for choosing Cary over Archie, for choosing the mask over love. He ended the letter with a sentence that reads like a final breath. Cary Grant will die soon, but Archie Leach died in 1944, the day Randy walked out the door. 1 year later, Cary Grant died on November 29th, 1986. The world praising him, celebrating him, immortalizing him. 4 months afterward, on March 2nd, 1987, Randolph Scott followed. 2 men, 12 shared years, a lifetime apart. A truth buried under decades of silence, finally revealed, and the world gasped, because the photographs had been there all along. The evidence had always existed in plain sight, but no one wanted to see what is stared back at them. A love story disguised as friendship, a heartbreak disguised as ambition, a tragedy disguised as Hollywood glamour. This was the truth Cary Grant never dared to say while alive, but his letters said it for him.